Hello there. My name is Kendall Jamal Doucette, and welcome to today's Real Talk, which is From Boys to Men, a conversation with Black men around their mental health. So, before we can begin today, I would like to just do a territory acknowledgement. I would like to begin by acknowledging the indigenous peoples of all the territories that we are on today. While we gather today on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the territories we each call home. The land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of Scugog, Hiawatha, and Alderville First Nations and the Métis Nation. This territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Ojibwe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. The treaties that were signed for this particular parcel of land are collectively referred to as the Williams Treaties of 1923. We do this to reaffirm our commitment to responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local indigenous peoples and their cultures. We need to protect and honor the history and people of these places, so please join me in a moment of reflection to acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we can, in our own way, try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Ensuring mental health is just as critical as ensuring your physical health. Mental health problems are rampant in our society, and Black men are not immune to this. Notions to appear strong, tough, or having it all together prevent many from seeking the help that they need and for addressing their mental health. So I'm honored today to welcome two individuals that come with lived experience around supporting their own mental wellness journeys while making sense of the experiences of moving through the world as Black men. From finance to mental health advocacy, our panelists will discuss the importance of amplifying our voices and changing the narrative surrounding mental health in our Black communities. So please join me in welcoming Asante Houghton and Michael Campbell. How are you doing today?
Doing okay, doing okay. I have a newborn, so apologize if I look a little haggard, and so I'm trying my best, but I'm doing okay.
No, thank you for being here today.
Congrats on that.
Thank you.
Michael Campbell has spent most of his career as a financial analyst in both the private and public sectors. First generation Canadian, Michael Campbell was born and raised in Toronto to Jamaican parents. He was recruited to play football for Mount Allison University, graduating with a bachelor's in communication. Michael also enjoys going to the gym, watching sports, riding his motorcycle, and dancing in the kitchen while cooking with his family. He loves to shop and looks forward to traveling more with the pandemic restrictions lift. So welcome today, Michael.
Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. Asante Houghton, so having firmly entrenched himself into the mental health space at large, Asante is now devoting his time, energy, and focus to the intersections of race and mental health. So seeking to amplify the myriad experiences of Blackness across the diaspora in order to shed light on the ways in which being Black in a world that seems to diminish Blackness impacts the mental health of Black people. Asante believes in confronting current and historical truths about our world and the human condition, however uncomfortable those truths may be, in order to move towards healing. Welcome, Asante.
Thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. Yes.
Thank you. So, as we're here to honor and highlight and speak to a very specific experience, I invite you, the viewer, to listen with an intention of connection and understanding. To step back from your own experience and sit in a space of empathy, curiosity, support, and non judgment. You will hear themes and pieces of people's stories from our communities that I hope will resonate and ignite compassion for our interconnected universal experiences and the ways we were shaped by them. The personal stigma around mental health is lessening thanks to individuals like we have here today, speaking out and breaking barriers to help create an environment supportive of mental well-being. However, there is more to be done. Drawing attention to an issue makes more people aware it exists, and we're here today to keep this conversation going. So welcome. So to get started off today, you know, in your own words, why do you think there's such, still so much stigma around mental health within the Black community, and specifically for Black men, and in the way that we try to cope and manage it? Michael.
Yeah, certainly. So, growing up, being a Black man, we were raised to be strong. One is mental health. Growing up, it wasn't a thing when I was growing up. It's more of like you're hearing it now.
Mm.
There's, especially in Black culture, it's like there's no such thing as mental health. It's like if you saw someone look acting crazy, you're thinking them as a madman. So there must be, high on drugs, and he's like crazy. So that's where the Black culture, and especially in the community that we grow up as, and Asante, you could jump in as well too, to like, basically we had to be, in order to cope with it, we had to cope in silence or be aggressive, and like not being aggressive, like going out and hitting someone, but like playing sports or playing football, you're using that aggression-ish, like that outlet to help cope with the mental health illness. And that's how I was able to cope with my mental health.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny you say that, because for me it was sports and music. Right now I was a rapper growing up, so it's like it's a very aggressive
right
music, right? And so for me, I had so much going on, but I had no one to really talk to about it, but two, no one I didn't feel comfortable talking to anybody about it anyways, because exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Like you're raised to be a particular kind of way, you know what I mean? And it was all about strength and being hard,
right,
all the time. So, as a basketball player, it's interesting because I was, especially as a teenager, I was kind of more of a quiet person.
right.
But then I get on the basketball court and people are like, who is this guy? Because he's so aggressive, right? And even though I was a skinny guy, I was like, I lived in the paint. I just wanted to bang bodies, and that's what it was about. In games, I was always like, I'm gonna foul this guy hard. He's not gonna come to the paint no more. But so you try to find different ways to cope, but you're still not really getting to the root of what's going on, And
so true.
So, but yeah, I think a lot of it is just, we're going to get deeper into it anyways, so I don't want to say too much right now, but a lot of it is just like conceptions and perceptions around, what Black people are and what Black men should be,
Right.
Absolutely.
Totally.
Asante, you're speaking to something. I think as I was reflecting on some of these questions, I was thinking about those tropes that sometimes come from within our community around Black people don't do blank, Black people don't do blank, and how we're constantly trying on other people's outfits as our own, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, if and this is also in the line of like language matters. What would you say to that? Black people don't do blank. How would you challenge that?
For me personally, I've always hated that, mainly because I was the person who I try anything. You know what I mean? Like, so as an example, the high school I went to was, it was a mostly Black high school. And then when there'd be like, we had this one thing, a couple things actually. We did this thing called Outward Bound. And it was essentially where they take a bunch of kids and they put them in the woods for like 2 weeks, and you have to figure it out. And the incentive was you get an extra credit, so you get a high school credit. So I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. Maybe I finish a little early, whatever, They sent, I think, 10 of us into the wilderness, and I was the only Black person on the trip. You know what I mean? Even though the whole school was Black, right? And and it was one of those things where that's an example. I just put myself out there and do different things, and sometimes people give me the side eye, like, dude, like, what are you doing with all these, these people are not you. You know what I mean? And so I used to get that a lot when I was growing up, but and when you're growing up, I think it impacts you a little bit more. I think it probably made me kind of have some like identity stuff growing up, but I always found that stuff to be it's not honoring the entirety of the person. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because when you think about like what falls under those categories of black people do this or white people do that or whatever, you know, some of those things are like trivial things, but some of them are, you know, I used to work as a caseworker with youth,
Mhm.
you know, supporting them to get from high school to college, university. And by and large, a lot of the black male students, the only ambitions they had, um, you know, well, a lot of them was sports and music, but even if we're talking academics,
Mhm.
they never felt like they could go into science, tech, math, any of these pieces, right?
Yeah.
A lot of that is just the internalization of this. Black people do this, white people, Asian people, whoever do that thing, and
Yeah.
I just feel it as I just see it as limiting opportunities, you know, and that for me has always been, you know, it's a challenging thing. I've always tried to rebel against, you know.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I don't know if you have more to say about it, Flash.
Yeah, certainly. No, it's funny that you mentioned that. Like in high school, for me was it was the opposite. I went to a all boys school in the city, and I remember my first day in high school. My mom came with me on the
As it
streetcar from St. Clair all the way to Avenue Road. And the first thing she did was came with me, and I was like that kid. I'm like, grade 9, going with your mom. I was like, oh, mom, what, it kind of embarrassed me. So she, and education was so high in our household. So she's like saying she went to visit the principal, and said, okay, if Michael's marks don't, you call me, and he will not play sports. So it was, there's high regards. And, when my mom was like saying, you being a black man, you have to work 100% more higher than the white person.
Mhm.
And as well as, she was like saying, you got to dress well because,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
can't have your pants sagging or, people are going to, think you're not educated or anything like that. So, growing up, I was like, right. And I remember when I was, going to St. Clair West Station, and I'm, wearing my blazer, the school outfit uniform. And this older white woman asked me, like, oh, so, I'm like, great, 15 years old. And she asked me, came up to me and said, like, can you show me which way to get to downtown, the streetcar? And I was like, oh yeah, you just straight down there. And she's like, oh, thank you. You're such a nice man now, so nice boy. And from that time, I was like, wow, you know, mom, hearing that, what my mom, she was driving me to be successful right now growing up. And, hearing what's going on right now with, especially, with with what happened to George Floyd, with this convoy,
Yeah.
it's just like, you know what, like it's not a protest, it's a convoy. Because if it was like, indigenous or black person doing that, it wouldn't be going on right now in Ottawa. It would be like 3 hours and then you're out. So,
Mhm.
like us black men is like, seeing this and we're just getting frustrated. And at the point is like, you know what? People are like saying, oh, is this really what's going on? We're like, we knew this from the get-go, from the very start. And as a parents growing up, Santev, jump in, it's like when you're a young kid, your parents are like saying, don't wear your hat backwards, you know. Um, if a cop comes, whatever, you just mind your own business and walk.
Mhm.
Don't be, hang around and come home at night and just like you had to have the cop talk
Yeah.
at a
Yup.
young age, very
Yeah.
young age. I remember when I was talking to my wife, and when during the whole George Floyd situation was happening, and she was like, "Oh, why don't you, early morning?" She's like saying, "Why don't you throw the, trash in the garbage?" And it was like early morning, like like around 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, because I usually go out.
Mhm.
And I was like saying, no, because in our neighborhood, if they see me wearing a black hood, the cops gonna come and pull over and like saying, "Hey, why you do? Is this where you live?" And
Mhm.
that's what the I guess communication with with my wife, because she's white, So she, is kind of understands, didn't understand that perspective and just kind of opened up her eyes.
Yeah.
So it helps, both way, and especially, I have a young daughter, so when it comes to parenting, is like, how in the white okay, how she was raised is different to how we were raised. So there's no back chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, man.
but yeah, so
But
that's a long topic, but
Absolutely. No, this is all right.
yeah.
can I say
So
something real quick?
yeah, absolutely, Asante. Go
You
ahead.
know, that reminds me of when Trayvon Martin happened, right? The whole hoodie thing, that you were talking about. And I was talking to my white friend about it at the time, and I said, the difference between you and me is you wear a hoodie, people think you're going for a jog. When I wear a hoodie, I'm Trayvon Martin.
Right.
And that's what it is,
Yeah.
And so it's just it's challenging. And then you talk about the mental health impact of living with that every day. That have to always be on guard. It's challenging, man. It's hard.
And you know what it makes me think about is like the double-edged sword of perhaps needing to have that armor or appear tough so that you can withstand and kind of move through the world and not have people trying to mess with you or interrupt your flow, right?
But what's interesting about that though is for me it was I was always putting on different masks because at school I had to be the soft nice guy,
right,
because of the teachers, right? But then when I was outside of school, I had to be the opposite of that. I had to be the guy who was trying to be hard, and I don't know if I really achieved either. But it was always like, but it was hard to like never be able to just be yourself without worrying about how your perception is going to make people treat you and possibly put you in danger in different ways, So
yeah, absolutely.
Hard, man.
So this kind of segs into the next question. So, in your own words, why may it be difficult for some of us to reach out, share our emotions and our vulnerabilities with one another? And if you can, how could you, if you're able to provide an example, how can we make spaces for these conversations to happen? What could it look like?
I think that what might make it challenging is, like Michael was saying earlier, just the perceptions of Black men and, Black masculinity. And well, when we talk about masculinity and femininity, it's like Black men could only have masculinity. That's it. Yeah. Right? And then for us, it's like, it's not even like regular masculinity. It's like superhuman. Like you have to be the strongest. You have to be the toughest. You have to be the one. You have to win every fight. You can't back down ever. But it's funny because people expect this from you and kind of valorize it. Like they put you on a pedestal for it. But at the same time, these are the same things that people will look down on you for possessing, because you're stereotyped as like this like savage. You know what I mean? And then at a certain point, I don't know about anybody else, but for me, like you start to internalize that. It's like I have to be this way all the time, otherwise, I'm a punk. Like you mean talking about my feelings? Are you what?
Yeah.
And I'm a very emotional person. I'm like really sensitive. Like I used to cry a lot when I was a kid, but I hit like age like 11, 12, and I was like, that crying business is done. Like,
Right.
And then no matter how bad I was going through it, I was just like, let me write some rap songs and, express my whatever I'm going through that way. Even when you try to talk, people don't receive it well. You know what I mean? Because I have two older brothers, and I did sometimes be like, yo, I'm struggling with this or that. But then because they're also young men, young Black men. And so we're all living in like this vortex of like this, backward masculinity thing. I don't like the term toxic masculinity, but, but we're living in like this, we're all pretending to each other. And then because of that, we can never have a real conversation because we're all pretending and all trying to like, we're vying for the position of alpha or the hardest. And, but, if that's happening, how can you talk to anybody? Because even when you try, the reception isn't there. You know what I mean? For me, my brothers just be like, "Yo, don't even worry about that. Be like, just go aside and figure it out." You
Yeah.
know, and but of course, I mean that didn't work. Um, but as I'm glad that we're starting to have these conversations now,
Yeah.
because I do see a difference. Because I work with a lot of young people, you know, in their 20s, in their teens, younger than that. I actually did a thing for some young boys who are like in grade school a few weeks ago, and it's just amazing how much more vocabulary and knowledge they have. So, but there's
Yeah.
still a lot of work to do, man. I don't know how you might feel about this, Michael. If you have any, you know,
Yeah, I totally agree with you 100%. Like, yeah, as mentioned as well, I have two younger brothers. So, my mom had three boys raising, and
hmm
thank God, like, all of us are still alive.
hmm
Not, getting, shot up or being, arrested. She was a strong woman, rest her soul. Like, she passed away. It's going to be like 16 years from, cancer. And yeah, like in our household, we did, we talked, but we didn't talk about like our feelings or like any, there's no such thing as like mental health programs. It's like,
hmm
oh, had a bad day at school. It's like, okay, well, son, you gotta work harder, and get the books. Or if you, lost the game, it's like, don't worry, everything's gonna be all right, right? So, but yeah, just like with like when my mom passed away, it's like I kind of just sheltered and kept that, that pain
Hmm.
with it. And and your friends are like saying, okay, let's go out and drink and help. And I was like, I just kind of, that's not me. I was just like, I had to deal with it myself. And you know, um, and it was funny because like me and my wife, went through a therapist, and she's like saying, have you ever, got reached out for a therapist when your mom passed? And I was like, no. And that was, that built up, feeling lost and hurt.
Hmm.
It helped to talk to someone who's, without a biased opinion, and a stranger. And that was the first
Yeah.
time like I could open up to someone who's not family or friend, and just to hear from someone, from a professional. And it helped. And when you hear about therapists, I'm like, what? That's Black people don't go to therapists. So
There's
so
those tropes again, right?
right, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's like, or you feel embarrassed, or anything like that. So I guess, helping, having that perspective and seeing someone who looks like me to go for help, and having this talk right now. Hopefully this will help other Black men to come
Hmm.
forward.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, 100%. I think one thing that happened to me maybe like 5 years ago. I had a situation. I'm not going to go into it, but it was essentially workplace sexual harassment from a woman who was above me. And anyway, it got really hectic, and it was like it impacted me a lot. And then I opened up to some of my boys about it, and then it was interesting how ever since now we started talking to each other,
Hmm.
right? And so it just took one of us to be like, "Yo, this is like what's going on," And then I actually remember we are drinking at Jack Astor's, and that's when it happened. And
Hmm.
then ever since, it's like now we like talk for real, and it's like we knew each other for like 10 years before that,
Right.
and never had any kind of conversation close to that, you know.
Yep.
So
Right.
sometimes, like what you're saying, Michael, is just you have to be the example.
Yeah, and and you're not the only one who had that. I got harassment as well too at one of my previous jobs, and it was with me. My mom, raised us to have integrity, and if you see someone who's in, who can't speak for themselves, I speak up for them.
hmm
Yep.
So, this person was getting complaints from other managers and other people, and she was just like a bully. And nothing, HR, nothing has, nothing changed until like I had, all this information. I was like saying, well, you know what, these people are going to the HR. Well, you know what, I'm going to go above. I'm going to go up to the senior VP, and to the CEO, whatever, and Roller had all my statements written down, had that, and you know what, they let her go there because she couldn't deny all those accusations. But the thing what bothered me the most was that they said, okay, if anybody asks you how come she let go, just say that made a lie. And that bottled me up, and had that that dishonest really mess with my mental health. But like some people who were close to me knew it, whatever. And then what was the kicker was that they gave this person, colleague of mine's, the job, um, to kind of throw that in my face because I went behind their back and this. So when I did was I just left the company, and then that's it. So
Wow.
mhm.
Made the right change for yourself.
Oh yeah, certainly,
Yeah.
certainly, man. Yeah, yeah. But parents say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? So
And also, I think about the impact of a change of environment and how sometimes that's necessary to
right, right.
mobilize change.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
um, when we think about the exchange of mental health literacy, coping skills, awareness, can you speak to the importance of visibility and mentorship in our community?
Yo, for me, it's everything. It's literally the reason I got involved in mental health.
Yeah.
Because I started out as a community worker, which I mean is actually, if you're a community worker, you're a mental health worker, if we're being quite honest,
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it was about 5 years ago now where I said I'm going to go full time mental health because about 10 years ago, I started telling my own mental health story in high schools, pretty much all across the GTA. And the more I did that, the more I had access to the tables and the committees and the rooms where people were making decisions. And every single time I would show up, I'm the only black male in these rooms. Every time,
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
you know? And then I also noticed that we were starting to have this conversation around mental health in our society in general. And we were starting to realize that we need a stronger mental health system. And we were building these things actively. And I thought to myself, if we don't have representation at the tables where we're building these new ways of doing things, then we're going to build services that don't support people that look like me and who have my story. Because not just necessarily like who looks like you, but it's the story as
Right.
well. You know what I mean? Because
Mm-hmm.
when it's not, you can look like me, but grow up affluent and you're going to have a different story than I had. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Um, so for me, that's why I got involved because I wanted to be the representation. I knew how hard it was going to be because it has been hard to be like one of the first, to
Right.
speak up and have a voice out there and to, talk up in meetings at work and all of these things. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard to be that first one, but I said, I'm going to take the slings and arrows so that other people can come from behind me and the door is already open for them.
Right.
But the other piece is, it took me so long to see a therapist because I wanted to see a therapist that looked like me. Eventually, I relented anyways and saw a therapist. She was a white woman, very amazing. Like she was like completely changed my life. Love her to death. But you know, I work with mostly racialized. I don't even like that word really, to be honest. But
Mm-hmm.
more
Yeah.
young black men and women, also like Latinos and South Asians and East Asians, and but mostly non-white peoples who I work with in terms of the youth I work with. And this is a frequent conversation that comes up: is I want to talk to someone from my culture
Right.
about the
Yeah.
things I'm going through because other people, one, they're not going to interpret it properly. Two, I
So
need to
true.
explain too much to them. Three, maybe they're going to say some, racist comments to me or microaggressions. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, one of my friends, a man that's in his 30s, he's trying to access therapy recently, and he's like, I had to quit my therapist because he started stereotyping me in like I was a gangster or something like that. And trust
Right.
me, guy, like not at all that. Like his brother's an Olympian, like like
Right.
not at all from that lifestyle. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but like these are the things that we have to deal with, and this is why the representation is so important, so that we don't have to deal with those things anymore.
Absolutely. Michael, how about you?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with everything what you said, Asante, is that, and I'm glad that you're going into that profession to help, especially with our young youths who need someone who, looks like us and will feel, I guess, won't feel judged when they're talking, and they have that type of security in regards to, being honest and, able to understand where they're coming from.
Absolutely.
The
You
security.
know,
I love what you said. That
yeah,
security.
Yes.
That's real.
yeah. Why is security important? I think about psychological safety. Why is this important?
Oh, yeah, it has, because you you could be that person will feel like, if you tell them your problems, they're not going to be afraid of telling you, what's going on. And, like I said, what happens in the dark will show up in the light. So that, you know, that you need people to believe in you and have that trust in you. And that's where I think is missing, especially with the black man, because they're always going to feel judged because of the color of their skin, that where they came from, how did he get this job, you those type of you know they're
Everything.
always going to get questioned.
Mm.
Do you ever like go on a flight, Michael, and then the flight attendants are trying to figure out what you do?
Yeah, you're right. Oh man, it's so
It's it's so
right.
like
Yeah.
it's everywhere.
Mm.
Right. And I just, and just like what you mentioned, just remember back in high school, like, when back then we used to go to the mall. And when you see like a group of black people, the security guards will always, come up and like saying, okay, you're no loitering, you need to, to leave.
Hmm.
And, and you see like a bunch of, Caucasian guys who are like skateboarding and, doing all the tricks on there, but they won't get, pulled, get harassed. And
Hmm.
that's, yeah, yeah, it just blows my mind.
You know, the other side to the mentorship and visibility, I think about allyship. What does allyship look like?
You know, I think it looks like listening.
Mm-hmm.
I think it involves a lot of listening and not, necessarily making assumptions. And I think, it's interesting because like when George Floyd happened, I don't know about you, Michael. I don't know if like your white friends started to hit you up with all these like weird comments around like I don't know, everyone just felt guilty all of a sudden.
Mm.
And it's weird for me because like I have white friends, right? And and these are people who are like very like liberal, progressive thinking
Right.
people. And when George Floyd happened, I was just so surprised that and the like how far away they were.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Oh,
And
totally.
and I'm a very open person. I talk about my experiences all the time, and I'm like,
Mm.
you hear all the stories I was telling you for years.
Right.
Didn't you? Didn't we have these conversations when Trayvon Martin was killed,
Right.
or Sandra Bland, or you could go down the whole list of names. Like
Right.
we had all these conversations. Like, weren't you listening?
Right.
So for me, listening is the first piece because when I try to be an ally for other other groups and other communities, I've learned over time that I can't walk in there with assumptions of other groups and what they go through. I just need to
Yeah.
listen, and not just listen to the story, but listen to how the story makes you feel and what the impact is on your
Mm.
life. That's
Right.
the important piece.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you on that there, Asante. Yeah, listening is key, and just like, living in that person's shoes, especially like a black man, of what is going on, seeing that perspective, like,
Yeah. So
you know
empathy.
yeah, totally,
Yeah. Yeah.
totally empathy, for sure, for sure. And yeah, like what you mentioned with the George Floyd is, the one was I guess when that girl who was filming that whole thing happened, and people are like saying, getting mad at her because she didn't jump in. I'm like, if she didn't do that video, we wouldn't know what's going on. And all this been happening since, like, Larry, oh my God, King, who was getting beaten up by the cops, and that was even filmed. And guess what? The cops were off, whatever. So with this, what happened to George Floyd, I remember with the whole verdict coming down, sitting in front of the television and see, will they find this guy guilty? Because every time it's the same thing, man. Get off free, and eventually it was a sign of relief, and that was showing that there, hope is starting to happen, starting to come, and that's the thing. Like, Black people, we didn't have hope. We didn't believe in the system because never favored in our way. Like with Trevor Martin, young kid walking getting candy, and then a man who carries a gun, and he gets off. Whereas, young kid dies, and it could be one of us, or it could be one of our friends or our kids. So, that was like really, the frustration part, because, we all knew that, we've been telling this from time and time back in the days. It's like, what? We've been telling you. And finally, you kind of, I guess, word the woke what's coming up on these nowadays. It's like they're awakened, but you should have been awakened a long time ago.
So, and, for me, what really, made me upset about all that is, why did it take that to happen?
Right.
Like, why did it have to be so gruesome?
Yeah.
In order for you to listen.
Right.
Totally. And it's like, is that how deeply we were being dehumanized? that it took that,
right?
Finally be like, oh, well, maybe this is actually happening. It's like, of course it is, man.
Right.
Like, I don't, like, I understand if you live in like a place where it's very homogenous. There's only one group of people. Everyone looks like you, and you're not a Black person. I understand. Like, if you live in Toronto,
right,
GTA, and you have no understanding of this, like, you're just not doing your homework. You're not paying attention. And I start to side eye you and be like, what's going on with you? Because I care about other people's issues.
Right.
I'm not gonna pretend I spend a lot of time with various different communities. I still care about their issues.
Right.
And I still read about them. They're still important to me because I share space with these people. Even if I'm not friends with them, I don't have a family with them, I share space with you when I walk down the street or I go to the movie theater or whatever it is,
Oh, totally.
It's about tapping into, your humanity and seeing that in others, looking for it, seeking it out.
Right.
So if you want to be an ally, it's not. You don't wait till something happens and then you're like, oh well, let me see what's going on. It's like you have to be an ally every day. Every day.
It's not a performance.
It's not a performance. It's not posting a black square on Instagram.
Yeah.
I think if you're gonna move towards allyship, it's important that you're committed to sustaining that.
Yeah, and trust me, we know who's real.
Yeah.
So you can't fake allyship.
Oh, totally.
Because I don't know about you, Michael, but by the time I was 10 years old, I had a racism radar.
Yeah.
And there's right? And there's various degrees. There's outright racist, there's ignorance, there's casually prejudiced, all these different things, microaggressions. But you have a radar because you just live with it so much, you experience it so much.
Right. Oh yeah, totally. I remember probably in high school, and back then when with the TTC you had like those transfer tickets, whatever. And I remember the driver. I just got off the 32 bus and just kept on to my next intersection. And at that time had a friend who's white, and they let her in, And then when it came to me, it's like, sorry, you can't. I was like, wait, I just had that same transfer ticket like her. And they're like, nope, you got to pay another token. And I was like, wow,
Mm-hmm.
and that was like, whew, yeah, early age,
Yeah.
early age.
This is kind of segueing into the next question around, both of you are fathers, and you're talking about those early experiences of understanding you're black. You know, what feels important to, I guess, impart to your children? What lessons?
I mean, I think the most important. Well, obviously you give the cop talk because, like,
Yeah.
that's the top thing on the checklist.
Right.
But beyond that, for me, it's really important for my children to know that to understand and be able to know when what's happening isn't your fault. When people are treating you based on your appearance and not based on what you did, right? So
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's like my older son. He had an experience a couple years ago in his school cafeteria where the cafeteria lady was, telling him to take off his hood, right?
Mm.
You know, and he knew there was something wrong with that. He couldn't articulate it, and I had to articulate it for him so he
Mm-hmm.
understands that it's not about your hood; it's about the color of the skin of the person wearing the hood, and
Right.
that was the issue because it was both him and his friend, right? And
Mm-hmm.
well, I mean, us being advocates, we went down to the school, and well, that's not a problem anymore. Let's put it like that. but anyway, it was important for me to impart to him that you didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
You know what I mean? And the way this lady was talking to you, it's not about the hood. It's about what she perceives you to be because of your skin color and someone who looks like you wearing a hood.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yo, my kid's into like anime and he plays the piano. Like he's not, that kind of kid.
Right. Right.
Right? So I don't know. For me, it's important to That's really important for me, is because you know if you don't have that growing up, I thank God I had a mom who was like that, who would let me know what's real from what's fake, in that respect. But I work with so
Mm-hmm.
many youths who maybe they didn't get that conversation and they're just experiencing all this racism and then they
Right.
start to internalize it. I
Yep.
worked with one young person. He wasn't even a black person. He was actually from, he's Sri Lankan, and
Mm-hmm.
he moved to Canada in his 20s. And I was doing a training, and he was a part of the training, and we were talking about diversity and power and privilege and racism and all these things. And
Mm-hmm.
he came to me after, and he's like, "Yo, I did not even realize that's what was happening to me.
Mm.
Yep.
Why people weren't giving me a job, or why people would look at me a certain way on the subway. Because he's a dark skinned, Sri Lankan dude with an accent.
Right.
And that just
Mm-hmm.
goes to show that how easy it is for people to internalize these negative perceptions of themselves if
Yep.
we don't have someone to help them interpret it as they're growing up. So
Absolutely. How about you, Michael?
Yeah. So, like for me is, having a daughter who's mixed. One is important for her that she knows both, from her mom's side and my dad's, and from her, meaning my side. Growing up, how, where I've grown up, show her where I came from. Diversity is very important for me. So one is, making her go to a school that has someone who looks like her, has not, black
Mm-hmm.
people, white people, Chinese, Indian, because you got to know, because eventually you're going to have to work with these people, and to know how to interact with everyone's culture, and like what I said, like racism is not born, it's taught. So one is making sure that be what I like about her, she's very strong minded. She has that authentic self about her. And when she likes to have her hair like in an afro, and she doesn't want it to be, has to be nice and big. And I'm like, you know what, I love it, I love that about her. And reading books on, like, about people who look like her, like, don't touch my hair and all that. So she knows that, hey, you have a voice, speak up. If you don't like it, you can talk about it. And I guess like you and me, Asante, like there was no like books or cartoons that back
Yeah.
then that we had. But nowadays they have that. So we're seeing that. We're
Yep.
seeing that.
I
So
want to ask that is like how has the model changed from your own upbringing?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Back then the model was like our parents and friends. Now it's like, you have like the social media, you have like, like I mentioned, books on these type of things, cartoon. And now with the school system is like now bringing in Black History Month. Back then, like back when I was a kid, we didn't have that in school. My mom I had to go to like Saturday black school
Mm.
to know what's going on, being black, because all we talk about is Johnny McDonald and all that of people more of like the slave trade and all that, but there's more to black than being slaves. There's like kings and queens, the Egyptians, all that.
Yeah.
So that's what I see has changed. It's more openness, and especially with Black Panther, the Marvel movie, that kind
Hmm.
of raised up the bar for that black people could make a film and could be $1 billion and see what happened. Like and it's so see this so proud to see young kids have someone to look up to.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, man. I remember growing up, Halloween. I always hated Halloween because I'm like, who am I gonna be for Halloween? You know what I mean? 'Cause all the superheroes were white.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? So
Right.
my Halloween costume was always some like generic nonsense. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
But yeah, definitely there's just so many more resources out there now. Like so many. Like when I was a big reader when I was a kid. I could never find a book that had me in it.
right.
Never.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? It was actually a friend who had to one time buy me a book, and he's like, "Yo, here's a book with a black boy protagonist in the book." You know.
Right.
Um. Uh. But now it's like, look, there's so many more of that kind of material, right? And I love that. You know what I mean? And I feel like, it's easy to say. I mean, there are still a lot of problems in the world with regard to race, like enough problems.
Hmm.
But we are making there has been change, So I don't like this concept of things will never change,
Yeah.
because things have. And I know a lot of young people now, they kind of get caught up in the vibe of, yo, like we're in a battle all the time, and to some
Right.
extent that's true, but it's also important to recognize the change that has happened. Because here's the difference for me: I grew up in
Hmm.
Toronto. There was a like growing up in Toronto. I don't know if you had this, Michael, but growing up in Toronto in the '90s, early '90s, you could, as a black male, you could not go downtown by yourself.
Yep.
You just, because it was dangerous.
Yeah.
Skinheads,
Mm.
You're right. Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah.
That was a real thing, and it wasn't just like an idea. Like, we actually were attacked, like literally,
Right.
like family members of mine. People try to bully me. I'm like 7, 8 years old. You have like
Right.
big man, like grown men who trying to bully me. I'm like, are you
Yeah.
Hmm.
serious?
True.
Right? The kids
So
these days
true.
don't have to deal with that.
No,
Right.
no. Yeah, I remember, man. Like Young Street, you can walk alone by yourself. Oh my God, you would be, jump. And
Hmm.
like us. I'm not sure if you remember this. Azate, it's like when you see like the Doc Martens and you see like the white
Hmm.
laces, you just run. You go the other way.
We were the people who was crossing the street.
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
know what I
yeah.
mean? So it's not like that no more, man. Like, I
No,
mean, so there's definitely been change.
for
You know,
sure.
the physical violence is not as much of a threat as it was at that time. Because
Totally agree.
when my brothers got jumped by some white supremacists, the cops said to our family that black people beat up white people in Regent Park all the time.
Yeah. Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
things are still difficult, and there's still a lot of work to be done. but change is happening slowly.
Yeah.
But it
It's
is
happening.
happening.
Yeah.
How do we sustain this change? What do we
Honestly,
need? Yeah.
ever since like everyone's got on this Black Lives Matter wave, like
Yep.
because much like you, Michael, I really love diversity. So while a lot of my friends are Jamaican, Caribbean, I've a lot of friends who are from other places too.
Right.
And now if you have BLM in your Twitter profile or whatever, I hold you to account. About once every 3 months, I go to my friends and I'm like, "What are you doing to live
Right.
up to this?"
Mhm.
It's true.
You know, because for me, it's important that this is not just a social media trend.
Yes.
Like, what are you doing every
Right.
day? Maybe not
True.
every day, but you know what I mean. How are you living
Yeah.
your life?
Yeah. Like for me, it's like,
Absolutely.
talk is cheap. It's the action.
Mhm. Absolutely.
I always say this: caring is an action.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Totally agree.
Yeah. So as we're winding down here, I'm just wondering, before we take questions from any of the viewers, are there any points or anything that you want to speak to?
I don't know. For me, I just keep thinking about allyship and what that
Yeah.
means. But I don't know if I have a point. But I think allyship is not. I think allyship needs to be taken seriously. And you know, one time for my training, we invited you know um, someone in to do a training for our participants, and he was a gay male, and he was talking about his experiences and what it means to be an ally to the gay community. And
Mm.
when I approached him after, and I was like, "Yo, I want to be an ally," like And then he was like, "Dude, you gotta understand that allyship does not mean that you can come into all of my spaces and take them over and show how good of an ally you are. That's not what it's
Mhm.
about. It's
Mhm.
about if you are in my space, you know, you you have to understand that you're an invited guest,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? And everything that happens in that space, if you do become prominent in that space, it's not you making your own space in that space. It's you must be invited,
Yeah.
Yep.
you know?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. I totally agree on that. It's having like a safe, community, um, and being heard and understood.
Yeah. Absolutely. I like your point there, Asante, about allyship. It comes from within the community, so you can't necessarily name yourself as such. The community will do that for you.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it's something that's earned.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I say
All
one
right.
more thing. I'm sorry, man. Just
Absolutely. Yeah, come on
I'm
in.
fired up now. So um, with the mental health piece, you know, a thing that I always say to describe the experience of racism or living in a racist society is living in a racist society is like living in an abusive household in the
Mm,
sense that, if you're a child or a woman or whoever's being abused, living in an abusive household, when you're outside that household and you're coming home, the anxiety that you feel every single time walking into that house
Right.
is very high, right?
yeah.
It's not because you're getting beat up every day. It might happen once a year, maybe
Mm,
once every 5 years, but yeah, but the impact of it happening has left you with that impression that you're always unsafe.
yeah.
Wow.
And
That's amazing, man.
Yeah.
Great.
and that's what it's like. Because every time I walk out the house, that's how I feel.
Yeah.
So true.
Well said, Asante. Thank you. Thank you to the both of you today. I appreciate your time and your energy. So it
I'm,
is our
I'm,
job. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just happy to share space with y'all. That's all I'm saying,
Yeah.
man. I appreciate
Ah,
you. Man.
Man, it's
thank
great
you.
having this, man. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So it is our job as an individual, as a community, and as a nation to help erase the attitudes and discrimination associated with receiving mental health services and to spread the word that seeking help is not a sign of weakness, but rather a sign of strength. Having honest and transparent conversations like we had today around our struggles lessens a significant amount of power stigma has around our experiences, and it further connects us at our collective cores. The more we can continue to hold these conversations, the more men and others from our community might feel inspired to seek the support they may need. There's a community of people out there that are willing and waiting to talk and walk alongside you on our collective journeys together, one day at a time. So again, a special thank you to the panelists that have joined me today. Your contribution has left us feeling so much better informed, educated, inspired, motivated to do our part. So thank you so much for today, folks. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
All right. We'll see you soon.
God bless.
Okay.